sponges are a weird group. They're not typical animals. They don't have a mouth. They don't have a gut. They don't have reproductive organs. They don't have sensory organs. They don't have nerves. But they are considered animals. And there are all kinds of sponges in the world. You're probably familiar with the bath sponges you can buy at a store, natural sponges. I've got one sitting in my desk right here. I don't know if you can see it or not. If you can't, I'll show it to you sometime. But anyway, there's that kind of sponge. But most of our sponges, and we only have a few that are intertidal here, are encrusting sponges. They form a crust on the rocks or whatever they're attached to. Excuse me. And most sponges do have some kind of a skeletal structure. The encrusting sponges have what are called spicules. And these are kind of microscopic structures. You either need a really powerful magnifying glass or a microscope to see them. And spicules, this is a very simple spicule of this particular sponge. Spicules can come in all shapes and sizes depending on the species. Some of them can be have lots of branches on them. Some of them could look like kids' jacks. Some of them could look like a medieval mace with knobs on them and so on. And actually, their shapes are used to actually identify the sponges. So I'm going, instead of describing this middle part right here, I'm going to go to the next slide where there's a diagram and explain it from there. This is a very simple diagram of a sponge. Sponges can be a lot more complex than this. But basically, these are the parts of the sponge that are important. Going back to this sponge right here, you see these big holes right here. And around these are called oscula. Each one is called an osculum. And around these are microscopic pore cells, microscopic pores. And the sponges feed on detritus, that is little organic particles in the water. They feed on microplankton, or actually they may feed on dissolved organic carbon that's dissolved in the water. So in order to feed, they have an incurrent pore where water goes into the animal, into this cavity called an atrium, and out through the excurrent pore, through that osculum. And that's the one you see with the big hole. And the way they get the water to move through, they have certain these cells called collar cells or choanocytes that have a flagellum, this whip-like structure. And they can beat these flagellum in kind of a regular manner to cause a current to move from the incurrent pore into the atrium and out through the excurrent pore. And these collars, which are composed of something called microvilli, which are just extensions of the cytoplasm into these little rod-shaped structures. And these are arranged in a collar-like arrangement. And those are what capture the food. Very small particles of, say, detritus. One gets trapped here on the microvilli. And since they don't have a mouth, the particle has to get inside the cell somehow. And there's a process called endocytosis. It's a word you don't have to memorize. But anyway, though, it's like this, when this particle of food touches the membrane punches in, like you're putting your finger into a balloon, then it pinches off and the food is then trapped in a vacuole, and then it's digested in the inside the cell. Now for dissolved organic carbon, they can actually just, the dissolved substances can just pass right through the membrane, either through passively or something called active transport. So, how do these things reproduce? Well, they reproduce mostly by fragmentation. Just pieces break off and they settle down and grow new sponges. But there is a sexual reproduction, and which is really weird because they have no gonads. They have this jelly-like material between the atrium and the outer walls called the mesenchyme, and there's cells that kind of circulate through there, and some of these cells can morph into eggs and sperm. So it's kind of a weird type of reproduction. And here's some of the sponges we'll see down there. We'll see the purple sponge. It likes kind of protected areas. It doesn't grow in so much in bright sunlight, but on the walls of some of the shaded rocks down there, you'll find it. You'll find the yellow-green sponge, and it's fairly prominent. It's actually the favorite food of one of the nudibranchs, the lemon peel nudibranch, and we'll talk about that later, actually tomorrow. And then there's the red velvet sponge, and it's primarily in the lower intertidal, mid intertidal or lower intertidal. And then there's another sponge, which we won't actually see the sponge itself because it's mostly subtidal, but you'll find the results of that sponge washed up on the beach. And almost every time I walk the beach down there, I'll find scallop shells. This is the shell off a rock scallop, and it's filled with all these little holes. And that's caused by the yellow boring sponge, Cliona. And it uses an acid to bore through the shells and cause all these perforations, which actually weaken the shells of the animal. But the sponge lives in all these little holes. And it's not only the rock scallop, there's other shellfish like an abalone, which we unfortunately don't have around here. But they'll get perforated by the yellow sponge. I think that's all I have on sponges. Any questions about sponges?
Feel free to type in a question